Okay, now I want to talk about shifting something. I'll shift a little bit. The title of this talk is not only what makes traders trade, but how it's changing in the digital age. So the whole commodities trading enterprise is being radically shifted. The trading now goes on round the clock, 24 hours a day. It goes on online. You don't have to be at the commodities exchange. You don't need the pits anymore. Gradually, open outcry, which was the technique of trading I referred to before, is being replaced by computer keyboards and screens. There's no longer even a reason why a trader has to go to the market to trade. And many of them have actually stopped. They stay at home. This is difficult and disruptive to the traders who relied a lot on the information that they picked up on the floor, what the other traders were doing. The impersonal nature of computerized trades makes it less possible to see the big traders that are working, or to identify the savvy small traders and take cues from what they're doing. There's no din, there's no bustle, no cues apart from the screen. Less and less are traders able to communicate with each other, unable to learn about or to manipulate the course of trading. Inside information is no longer available through the usual channels, although I think there's a lot of legitimate concern that it's available, more of it is available through other sorts of channels. Some of the traders are taking a middle course here, not leaving the course, but they're taking their computers to the floor. So they actually enter their trades on the computer and pick up information while they're doing that. They kind of follow the market in that way as well. But the trend is unmistakable, and it's now generally acknowledged. It's just a matter of time before the pits will be shut down completely, and all the trading will go on online. Interestingly, this shift has been immensely beneficial to Victor. Highly influenced by the competitive atmosphere of the floor, all too easily pulled into the teasing and posturing of his peers, locked into stubborn positions as a result of that, it's as if all the distractions have been edited out of the process. The impersonal quiet of the computer screen has allowed him to listen to his mind more clearly and to trade more effectively. To be sure, he feels a little deprived of his contact with others because there was a certain amount of fun in that, but it's more than offset by his increased effectiveness in making money. As you can imagine, this has also placed in sharper relief the underlying dynamic factors that affect his trading. When he screws up now, it's much more obvious why he's screwing up. But other traders are having a much harder time with the anonymity and silence of this shift. They have to rethink their trading styles radically, and in most cases they settle for reduced profits. The Mercantile Exchange's public offering a few years ago, they sold shares. I mean, they do another business. And those who had seats were the shareholders, basically, and when it went public, they had a windfall profit. I think it was something like $11 million per seat. And, nice little tidy nest egg. So those who had those seats had that. They could take that money and essentially retire or reduce the level of their activity. But the smaller traders who leased their seats from larger companies to participate in the MERP were essentially left out. It's a very sobering time. You could say that the digitized and computerized trading continues and amplifies a long historical process of rationalization and dematerialization of all forms of commerce. Commodities traders are further and further away from the actual stuff they're responsible for moving around the world. Right? And in the old days, in the markets, in the souks, there were things were piled up, or there were barrels here, or piles of timber, or whatever it was that people were sort of selling, and there'd be kind of like haggling that was going on. But more and more, these guys never see oil, they never see the stuff itself. All they deal with, what they're trading back and forth, are kind of futures contracts. And so, going from the pits to the computer just is another further extension of that process of dematerialization. It's all become abstracted. The workings of Adam Smith's invisible hand in the market are getting harder and harder to detect. So there are some consequences. I want to end by talking about how that's changing things. Cheating and manipulation are increasingly hidden. On the floor of the Merc, the traders had a pretty good idea of what was going on in the shadows and who was doing it. They also had a good idea of how much profit was to be gained through undercover trading, as the lives that they were leading were relatively open to each other. The trades that disappeared from the floor could be roughly gauged, and the money that the traders siphoned off the floor was reflected in their lifestyle. If a trader bought a new Ferrari, for example, it had to come from somewhere. So they knew, there were signals, there was information that helped them kind of keep track about what was going on under the surface. So the cheaters were known. The cheating was some degree contained by the public nature of the information about the lives they led. But now that the traders are invisible to each other, the hidden deals are harder to detect and their scope harder to measure. Frankly, I have no way of knowing how much goes on behind the scenes. But the traders believe a great deal is. That upstairs, more and more, in a sense, is engaging in kind of manipulative, hidden manipulations of the market. They are, of course, prone to paranoia, but I think their concern is legitimate. Compliance on the floor has always been largely ineffective, as I said, often considered a joke. But today I think there's a serious question: is it even possible? The second consequence of the change is that the opportunities for social advancement that existed for talented traders are now significantly curtailed. People aren't coming in from the sidelines as runners or as clerks. The informal and rough community no longer recruits these people to do their menial work, certainly not in the numbers they did before, providing chances for outsiders to observe and to learn the trade. The web of personal relationships that offered stakes to people and extended helping hands to eager and gifted newcomers is fast falling apart. And there's a third and final point that concerns me about this. What we're seeing, I think, in the collapse of open outcry is the continuing rise of a new class of financial experts in society. The role of investor capitalism in our society drives an intensified, relentless search for new sources of profit and greater profitability. I wrote this paper about 6 months ago. I think we've seen very much how that relentless drive has driven people to do really, what in retrospect seem like really, really dangerous and stupid things. But the commodities trading is a significant part of this development. Now, hedge fund managers, investment firms, banks, and others are increasingly turning to commodities as investments. The rise of digitized, round-the-clock trading amplifies the opportunities for profits, while the development of more and more sophisticated computer programs to track and analyze trends and respond rapidly to market development increasingly takes the risk of personal judgment out of trading. As I said, these guys had a kind of an intuitive feeling for how the market was going. But I think increasingly more and more sophisticated, high-powered computer programs are making similar kinds of judgments and making it less necessary to rely on that kind of intuitive judgments that traders used to make. Many traders have commented to me in the past years how the market has become extraordinarily more volatile now, given to sudden, huge, and unpredictable shifts. This is due, in part, they believe, to the fact that bigger players, trading electronically, are playing a greater role and having a greater influence on the market. This places a greater premium on the trader's ability to be mentally nimble. But it also means that trading will become more and more specialized, open only to those who have the training, the skills, the sophisticated education, and tools to grasp the nature of this new globalized market. The messy and noisy transactions in the pits are increasingly out of place. Some of the extraordinary fluctuations in the price of oil, food, metals, and other commodities can be traced, of course, to these trends. But I suspect as well that increasingly profit is being skimmed off the top by more and more sophisticated traders who are working upstairs, behind the scenes, armed with computers and new sophisticated sources of data to serve investors. It's sobering to me to recognize that this further marginalizes our interest in and commitment to other social agendas. This is before the recent election, right? Answers to our problems that do not involve greater profitability for somebody, somehow, somewhere, someplace, typically up until now have not been getting attention. The market increasingly seems to be our answer to everything. But another sobering thought for us is that the increased rationalization and invisibility of the commodities market is also rendering the role of the unconscious more difficult to detect. In the pits, the spectrum of human motivation was there to see. The vanity, the competitiveness, the rivalries, the fears, the jokes, the collisions, the collusions, the bonds that animated the spectacle of trade, they were all there to be seen. The hidden motives, as a result, were not too difficult to detect as well. Far from buried, they were an integral part of open outcry. So how will we be able to detect the unconscious in their absence? That's my paper.